some people claim that you need a God to be good. You need divine commandments, you need cosmic reward and punishment for people to behave and for society to function. But the reality is that no one religious tradition has a monopoly on ethics. There are non-Jewish peoples and religions that have ethics and ethical systems and ethical individuals. And there are secular societies and secular individuals that do very well on measurements of human happiness and ethical behavior. Furthermore, if you know anything about the Talmud, you know that no rule, even in the Torah, no matter how clear, is sufficient without extensive explanation. And if you know anything about Jewish history and culture, you know that the Jewish people have not thrived or suffered in direct relationship to their ethical behavior or their ritual obedience to commandments. I find that the same principle applies when I'm dealing with my children. No rule I make, no matter how clear, is exempt of them finding a loophole in it. And it's not as effective to offer threats and punishments as it is to offer reasons why a particular choice is better one than the other. The reality is that there is no ethics without moral reasoning. And so you can be good without a God because it's the moral reasoning that makes the difference. After all, that's how Job can argue with God over the justice of his suffering. Or Abraham can ask, shall not the judge of the universe do justly? The good is independent of the God. An important question for a secular person then is how can you define the good without divine endorsement? And how can you apply those rules to organizing society? We are not alone in this project. This has been the project of philosophy for centuries. And so secular Jews are heirs to both the process of Jewish ethics, which have grappled with how people can live best together, and the wider human project of philosophy. We draw on both of these insights. And so we've discovered that there are ways to be good that emphasize human dignity, human self-fulfillment and human happiness, mutual responsibility between individuals. Those values can be the basis for a secular lifestyle and an ethical lifestyle. Now, the concept of ethics presented in this system of life is based on a very different approach to the question of a God than the King of Kings that you hear and see reflected in rabbinic theology, prayer, and in the Bible. Even traditional Jewish thought understood that human beings were on their own when it came to moral reasoning. Traditional Jews believed that Torah was min hashamayim, that the Torah came from heaven. And if you remember the famous story in Bava Metzia, they also believed that the Torah was not in heaven. Lo b'shamayim hi. It was up to human beings to interpret it. Now, a secular Jew will take one more step. Not only is the Torah not in heaven, we might say it's not even min hashamayim. It's not from heaven either. It was made by human beings. And if these sources, these values were made by human beings, some of them reflect our values, and we agree with them. Some of them disagree with our values, and we disagree with those values even if they are Jewish. And some of them challenge us to grapple with what it means to be a good person, both as a Jew and as a human being. We can learn from our inheritance, but we can also choose not to reflect values that don't reflect our beliefs. This approach to ethics indicates a very different concept of God from that of traditional rabbinic theology and belief, whether in the Bible or in rabbinic sources, the idea of a King of Kings who commands, who rules, who listens. We no longer believe in a God who cares what we wear, what we eat, what days we work, and for that matter, what we say about that being. For a secular person or a secular Jew, how do they relate to the concept of God in Jewish tradition? Their first statement is, which concept of God out of Jewish tradition? The God in early books of the Bible is very different from the God in later books of the Bible. After all, that's the journey of a literary character, from author to author and from adventure to adventure. You can go through all of Jewish history and see the God of the Karaites versus the rabbis, the God of Jewish mysticism in the Middle Ages in the Zohar, and Maimonidean rationalism in the same time period. The dveikut, the cleaving to God and to the Rabbi of Hasidic Judaism, and the legalism of their opponents. The pantheism of Spinoza, who believed that God was everything, God was the universe. And the partnership theology of Reform Judaism that imagined God helps and encourages but does not intervene in the world. All of these are very different concepts that all claim to be that same name, that same word, God. So the question that then arises is, why do you have to say the word God when you mean something else? If you want to say love, why not say love? If you want there to be peace in the world, why not say, let us make peace, na'aseh shalom, instead of, may he make peace, oseh shalom? We can do it. Why wait or ask for anyone else to? You see, our challenge is that our Judaism needs to be more than simply a historical reenactment. We could follow that past tradition of redefining the word, make it mean what we want it to mean, or make small edits to change a phrase here or there. But in the end, it's much more satisfying if we can live our values and say what we believe. Some are unwilling to make those changes. Others have the courage to take their inheritance and adapt it to what they want it to be. We may lose some continuity in saying the old words the way they were said before, but we gain the integrity of saying what we believe and living our values, and that has its own compensations to it. Now, how do we make choices of what to change and how to change? The same way our ancestors made choices of what to change and how to change based on what we believe and what we value. After all, consider the changes in Jewish life over the centuries, from a temple priesthood to scholar leadership under rabbis, from sacrificial worship to synagogues, from a Near Eastern tribe to a global people with diverse world cultures. Jewish life has always been one of change and transformation, and the modern world is no different. And so we are part of that continuity of change that is Jewish life. Some people claim that Judaism is a belief system of deed but not creed. It's not about beliefs at all, they say. It's about what you do. But this is simply not true. There are so many examples in Jewish history and tradition and literature and liturgy that tell you what to believe. Maimonides' 13 Principles of Faith, each of which begins, I believe with perfect faith in several things. The recitation of blessings and prayers every day as part of the traditional ritual that affirm belief in a God who does certain things and who wants you to do certain things. The arguments in traditional circles between kavanah, the intention one should have, and keva, the fixed form that one should perform. What you believe makes a difference. So it's not a question of believing or not believing. After all, secular people believe things too. In some ways, the question is less a matter of what we believe than a question of why we believe. Human beings have belief systems, and so do secular people. Some people imagine that being a secular Jew is a matter of subtraction. Blessed are you, who and doesn't. It's all negative. But the reality is that we have to substitute to meet our needs. Religion meets human needs. Needs for community, needs for meaning, needs for explanation, for inspiration. And secular people have those same human needs. We meet them in different ways. We may find inspiration from music, or beauty, or nature, or our connections with other people. We find a sense of explanation from science and the natural world, and not from revelation and mystical vision. But we meet those human needs that religion meets in secular ways. The truth is that everyone believes. Some argue that Judaism is a religion of deed, not creed. It doesn't matter what you believe as long as you do what you're supposed to do. But as the sources in this lesson indicate, over the centuries, many Jews have tried to define what you're supposed to believe. They've written prayers that you're supposed to recite that reflect a belief in a certain kind of a God who does certain things and acts in certain ways in the world and wants you to say these things exactly the way they've been written. That is a system that includes belief. Even think about the debates in religious Judaism between keva, the fixed form of ritual, and kavanah, the intention, the belief, and the attitude that should be held behind it. Belief makes a difference. Secular Jews have beliefs too. We believe in equality. We believe in human rights. We believe in the value of diverse cultures, including Jewish culture as a distinct and unique culture among all the unique cultures in the world. Secular Jews have one foot in Jewish life and one foot in the wider world of human experience. We are rooted in our particular culture, and yet we can use that culture to understand the broad expanse of humanity and to learn from their experiences as well. Some values that Jews have brought to the world have been good for the wider world, but some values from the wider world are good for Judaism. Values like feminism, like democracy, like archaeology and science, all of these new innovations that have brought insight into our own people, our own history and culture that we would never have had before. The book of Psalms is not a secular and humanistic book. But passages in the book of Psalms, behold how good and pleasant it is for people to live together, who is the individual who enjoys in life, mi ha'ish, these are statements that can provide inspiration for secular and humanistic Jews. We don't have to redefine God to find meaning out of Jewish tradition. We don't have to assume the tradition agrees with us in every particular. We can have an honest and mature and realistic approach to our heritage. After all, it's all ours, this vast variety of Jewish culture that we've inherited, from the Bible to the Talmud to Jewish mysticism and rationalism to modern Israeli poetry and modern American Jewish culture. It's all our inheritance. We choose from it that which inspires us the most. We don't need to redefine God to make it mean what we want it to mean. We don't need to assume that Jewish tradition agrees with us in every particular. We are allowed to have an honest, realistic relationship with our past. In some ways, the same way we do with our parents. When we are 5 years old, we believe that our parents know everything. When we are 15 years old, we've decided our parents know absolutely nothing. By the time we're 25, maybe 35 years old, we realize that they did know some things. They were human beings. They did their best. They succeeded. They failed. But this honest appreciation for who they are and what they brought to our relationship helps deepen that connection and helps us love them even more. The same is true with our Jewish life. The more time we spend understanding the realities of Jewish history, accepting where we connect with the past and disconnect with the past, bringing our values to bear in a dialogue with that inheritance, the more we will find a way to love it, but also to make it ours. And the same is true for the universe as a whole. We live in a world that does not care whether we live or die, but we care. And so if we want the world to be better, we must make it so. If we want our Judaism to be inspiring and meaningful, we must make it ours. That is the task of every Jew in the modern world, but particularly for secular and humanistic Jews.